Welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to be exploring Ingalls Shipbuilding's journey in the PLM. My name is Katie Jamison, and I'm the manager of engineering configuration management at Ingalls. Those of you that don't know about Ingalls, Ingalls is America's shipyard. That's what we call it. No offense to any other shipyards. But we employ about 11,000 employees, and we've been in business over 85 years. Located on the Mississippi Gulf Coast in a sleepy little town called Pascagoula. So I've been in configuration management for 13 years, and prior to that I was a pipe designer for 16 years, and I also worked on the ship design management team for the DDG 1000 program. So that's kind of my background experience. So what we're going to talk about today is we started in Eris in 2016. We started gathering our thoughts and ideas and vision in 2015. But in 2016, we migrated with one program into Eris, and we created workflows and item types all centered around engineering and planning and supply chain management data. In 2021, we migrated all of our historical information we build 4 different types of ships at Ingalls, and we migrated our data and created items for the program office, project management type items, and so forth. We've expanded our benefits. So before we had 3 different tools that we used. We used an old mainframe system to manage our items and change papers and drawings and so forth. And we had a homegrown request for service module that we created liens in and identified issues on the deck plate and that sort of thing. And we had an IDE that we just stored the data in. There was a really small workflow, but it was just planning and material, and then it came to SIM for issues. So we've expanded that using Eris as our enabler, and we've got full-blown workflows. Planning and material are impacted. We've integrated ShipConstructor into our business model, and things are working pretty good right now. But pretty good is not good enough, right? So some of the challenges we had is ShipConstructor used to be a file-based historically, and they went to a database. So even though we were still able to implement that process, it was challenging, and because it wasn't file-based. Change is one of the hardest things we do at shipbuilding. Initial development, sort of easy, but change is hard because you have whole effectivity. You have, we have a problem where we don't have the ability to start another change while one change is going through the workflow. So we have to get that corrected. And with shipbuilding, there's a span of, like on a LHA, it takes 7 years to design and implement a LHA. So it's quite a lot, much longer than some of the other industries that use Eris. So in the future, we want to reduce time with construction without duplicating the cost. And we're going to work with Eris and SSI with a roadmap based on what we learned in the initial implementation. So we're going to address some of the change issues and whole effectivity, enable the logic conflict with the no pencils down, is what one of my coworkers calls it. We need to be able to, create one change for the Navy, a Class 1 change, and also do a Class 2 change at the same time. And then we also want to implement rules-based design, rules-based planning, automated QA, automated installation products, and then create the digital thread as part of a normal design process. So that's some of the things that we're looking towards in the near future. And currently we're working on a vision with another shipbuilder and Eris and ShipConstructor, and we're going to transition from a drawing-centric to part-centric with a model-based configuration management approach. And we're going to evaluate the current digital thread upstream and downstream to provide communication between engineering products and design throughout the shipbuilding lifecycle. So as we transition the approach to model-based products, deliverables, we're going to facilitate an execution of work and productivity on the shop floor for upcoming younger workers. And if you have teenagers at home, you know, they play video games all the time. So our new shipbuilders of tomorrow will be able to look at a model a lot easier than the shipbuilders of today. So if we can get rid of that drawing and go to more of a part-centric, model-based centric, we're hoping that that'll save costs down the road. So some examples of our automation we want to create is we want to take advantage of the billing information to collect product components. We want to automate the extraction of a product, and we want to automate the QA process. So Bruno is going to discuss how SSI plans to help us solve these problems in the future.
Okay, thank you, Casey. That was great. So I think I'll just ask a question to you now. You mentioned ARIS, but I think what we're investigating now is a vertical solution on top of the ARIS platform.
Yes, a shipbuilding field.
All right, okay, yeah, because that's I think one of the new things that we're going to be bringing to this.
It's gonna allow this to happen.
Well, it's going to be a platform for us to tackle those problems, right? So, all good? Okay, so my name is Bruno Benevolo. I see familiar faces here. For some of you who don't know me, I'm Director of Enterprise Solutions at SSI. I'll do a quick rundown on SSI and what we do. My background, originally read aeronautical engineering at Imperial College in London, but then transitioned to offshore, then CAD, software development, technical document management, PDM, PLM. And I've worked with SSI since 2008, initially around the commercial shipbuilding world and offshore projects, and then transitioned to working with them on the information management side of the business. And I was involved as together with the SSI team that worked with Casey and others who are present here in their first integration of ShipConstructor. And it's, I have to say, Casey, I'm really honored to be here, in your presence again, because it's great to see this journey evolving and being part of it still. So, talk about a bit about SSI. I think some people in the US know ShipConstructor software or ShipConstructor, but it's essentially ShipConstructor Software Incorporated. That's why it's SSI. And we are completely focused on shipbuilding, right? That we do not do anything else. We're just focused on delivering technology solutions, essentially around design and information management for shipbuilding. So we have people. I've got people, for example, here. Honored to have the presence of our VP of Sales and Operations, Pat Roberts, here, who's worked with us for over 17 years. Yep, and who's come from worked in the industry for, I won't say how many years, right, Pat, but it's been a long time. And in the US office and in Canada, we have a lot of people who have that shipbuilding background. So we have the expertise not only in terms of developing software, but also understanding shipbuilding needs and requirements. We've been in business for over 30 years. It's a privately owned company, 500 clients, 7,000 licenses. We do a lot of work with universities and technical colleges as well to make sure that we can provide help for the younger generation that are coming up to speed to be able to use our tools. And that's been a very positive strategy for us, because I'd say right now in North America, if you ask someone, provide your CV, if you're a shipbuilding designer, you'll see that they have ShipConstructor in their CV. We have a wide range of clients, both commercial and defense. Of course, today we're going to be focusing more on the defense sector. One of the key things here is, we work with big, medium-sized, and large clients. And one of the reasons, I think that's important to always stress is that we have a key goal at SSI that our software needs to be easy to use. And we're always developing software that, takes complex problems and tries to find, ways that you can approach those problems and solve them with a user interface or an approach that's easy for the end user. So a very impressive track record in the defense sector, over 750 ships in the water, some familiar names. I think there are even companies here present today as well as Ingalls. And again, we can see, we range in vessel size from patrol boats all the way up to the LHA class there, Hunter Ingalls. So that shows the scalability of our software and the capability for it to address, cost-effectively needs of our clients in various sectors of the business. So now talking about our own journey. So we started off in 1990 as essentially a CAM product. We were evolving. Then there was a big, very intelligent decision leap of there was an insight there from our president at the time, Rolf Otter, to make it an Autodesk-based product that would facilitate the transition. A lot of companies were using 2D software, so we made it a lot easier. Then we evolved to 3D modeling, build strategy. I often say we call it ShipConstructor because it's actually used to not just design the ship, but also to create the build strategy. So that's one of the key aspects there of our software compared with other design packages. And, for today's conversation, I think the big, steps that happened more recently were 2016, as Casey mentioned, when Aris got involved with Ingalls, and we were there to support that process, both on the ShipConstructor integration side, but also the 3D visualization side, providing integration of a custom version of Navisworks, a DMU tool for visual planning to be able to take place. Our executives had seen, had been talking about the need to have an information management platform. We could see our clients had that need. So in 2019, we launched the first version of Shipbuilding Plan that was focused more on detailed design data management. And more recently, we expanded our footprint to include the full digital thread from requirement through to functional, through to detailed design. And integrating with downstream systems. That's what we call our digital shipbuilding platform. So it's an end-to-end platform. And of course, we've had the partnership with Ingalls since 2005. Ingalls, Avondale was, I believe, the first user of our software. Then Ingalls started using it for the DDG-51. And what's been, any successful partnership, it works when you have one side listening to each other, and we've developed, a very good relationship with Ingalls, listening to their vision, their needs, and also providing our vision of what we're seeing coming ahead in the industry, and keeping that dialogue going. Right? And so we're excited now to be part of this next step of their journey. So Casey put out a list of things, that Ingalls are looking for, right? And of course, that is a huge range of capabilities that they're very specific. But what we see is we need to provide a foundation, capability, a platform that can leverage those specific use cases. So we need to provide an integrated digital thread spanning the full shipbuilding lifecycle, a part-centric data model, which is something that Casey mentioned, and also part-level relationships, moving away from a drawing-based approach for managing change. That will also, of course, help manage concurrent change, which is when you have not only the use case that Casey mentioned, but also 3D models when you're doing change within the 3D model. And 3D visualization of the product data throughout the life cycle, so making sure that people outside of engineering can also access that information. So our digital shipbuilding platform includes both our 3D CAD/CAM tool, ShipConstructor. We also have integration with Autodesk design tools as well. And we have Shipbuilding PLM, which is our vertical solution developed on top of the Aris platform. I'm going to speed up a bit because there's a lot to go through. So why digital shipbuilding? Why did we develop this platform? We're listening to Ingalls and their needs, and also other large-scale clients as well. And one of the challenges that we've seen, of course, is product data management. This is familiar territory for everyone, and you have a huge amount of product data that you need to manage throughout the life cycle in shipbuilding. But what makes shipbuilding really fun, so I say fun again, is this. So it's all happening at the same time, right? And that's what makes it so tough. You do not have the happy path of waiting engineering to be over before you start doing creating your MPP model and your procurement and then your manufacturing. So it's this, you have effectively concurrent digital threads that are going on. They have interdependencies. And this is, I would say, it's still, shall we say, an optimistic way of looking at it, because you don't have change management kicking in here, right? When change happens as part of this, then you get much more complexity in terms of how you manage the processes, right? So the key message here, why is shipbuilding so hard? Why has shipbuilding found it so hard to implement PLM effectively? Is because the processes are essentially concurrent and complex. So shipbuilders are smart people. They don't wait around for problems to be solved. And so, they started solving the problems. So they typically start creating in-house legacy systems. And then when they do approach vendors, they often find that the vendors don't even understand, that specific process and how it needs to be addressed. And what we find is you often, when we walk into shipyards, and clearly Ingalls have moved away from that and already in a much better state of their enterprise architecture, but a lot of shipyards we still find are stuck with messy, inefficient enterprise architectures for their data management. So our digital shipbuilding platform, Shipbuilding PLM, which is this vertical solution developed on top of Aris, it's the backbone of that, right? And we see it as being able to unlock efficiency gains. I swear I did not change my presentation because there was the Aris theme of unlocking innovation. It was already there, so it was a fortunate coincidence. When I saw that, I thought, oh, that's nice. And it's fully integrated with SSI's industry standard ShipConstructor 3D CAD/CAM system, and also now, because we're getting earlier stages of the design lifecycle, integrating with Autodesk schematic drawing tools. Current capabilities, the full digital thread from requirements, functional product model, production design, proved accuracy. To remind everyone here in the room can read, I think, it's a lot of capability, and the key thing here is there's a lot of this capability out of the box because it's a vertical solution. Right. Okay. So if we now look at the shipyard, when you're building the digital ship, shipbuilding PLM is going to be the hub of configuration controlled information from engineering. Of course, SSI has an approach that we understand we need to talk to other systems. So, both our own platform and the Aris platform provides the capabilities to integrate with other systems. And it's not only that, we develop partnerships with people who are also specialized in shipbuilding. So, for example, recently, Florganice, a company that some of you might not be familiar with, but they're a Dutch company specialized in manufacturing execution or shipbuilding planning. We've been involved in an SRP project with them as well to get that rich data set to feed their system. So it's important to have the technology, but also develop the relationships to deliver, these shipbuilding-specific solutions as well. So you've got that rich data set, and then you've created that. Now, obviously, you have an opportunity to hand over information. And of course, we know that in the industry, who's going to pay for that digital ship is still an open question in a lot of contracts, but the data is there, and how much data you need to hand over is something that's still, I think, being fleshed out in different scenarios. And then, of course, you have an opportunity to then use that data set later for fleet sustainment use cases. Right. Okay. I'll do a quick overview of the platform capabilities. So again, ShipConstructor is put there together with Autodesk as handling the design part of our solution. And then we have Shipbuilding PLM with a wide range of capabilities, and again, available as part of the core product. And we do say it's the first only shipbuilding-specific digital platform. So, there are other PLM vendors who have played in the shipbuilding world, but we are the first to provide out of the box a pre-configured vertical for shipbuilding. So we have a series of applications on top of the Aris platform to manage all that rich data set. a lot of this is familiar for those of you who are also in other industries as well, but it always has that shipbuilding specific characteristic and need to adapt to those use cases. And that's what we've done, right? We've taken the ARIS platform, and what we're seeing here is, for example, the left-hand side, that's just the ShipConstructor data that we're managing, but we're also managing, I can't even fit it in one screen, right? There's requirements down there as well that we've also touched. So every item type there, they've all been touched by us, and we've, added additional data structures, coding to support that rich digital thread. Right. And of course, that's something that when we look at the industry, one of the challenges of PLM is typically a vendor would turn up with a core PLM capability. ARIS had faced a similar scenario when they went to Ingalls, but of course ARIS had a low-code advantage and also had us in the room to help with that implementation effort together with other partners. And so, a lot of customization is done to address those gaps because people don't provide a shipbuilding-specific solution. But with our approach, because we provide shipbuilding applications, you're essentially facing a configuration problem afterwards. So it's much easier to achieve a rollout that addresses those gaps, and you can do it incrementally. You don't have to do like a big bang where you've swapped everything out. You can do it incrementally as well. Of course, no one is going to Casey's point, what they have now is good, but clients are always changing. So you might need to address future requirements as they change as well. So we're going to carry on developing our applications as well. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, sorry. So it's a digital platform for the complete shipbuilding lifecycle. Just whiz through here. It's how we connect that digital thread. So, we have requirements management linked up to service structures, systems, functional part instances. We import from Autodesk schematic tools from, for example, Plot 3D and basic AutoCAD and other diagram tools, functional parts linked to the drawing and then linked to the service, right? We have a part catalog management capability because it's very important to manage maturity of parts and determine applicability of parts in the shipyard. And then you start creating your 3D systems, which needs, of course, to follow what you've defined in your functional design phase. So here we see the digital threads being connected already from the functional world to the 3D world. And that, of course, allows you to then leverage information and connectivity, being able to see related VFI as well within the platform. Casey mentioned rules-based design. So this is more on the design side of the world of the use case specifically. And we are aware of that need, and we have been developing capabilities for rules management. And that's an area that we're going to carry on having further conversation to evolve that capability as we move forward. The key aspect here is we do see there is an advantage to move to the left, make sure that designers can resolve their problems earlier before they are, going through a multidisciplinary design review. So making sure we provide better tools within the ShipConstructor platform to manage those requirements. Of course, as well as the capability to work in a collaborative environment in ShipConstructor, you also need to do multidisciplinary visual collaboration. One of the key things, as Casey mentioned, for a new program that Ingalls are involved with another shipyard, is the capability to collaborate, right? And that's an area that we leverage the 3D visualization and the visual collaboration capabilities of the ARIS platform. So now you're at a stage where you're creating the 3D production model. So as I mentioned, we do have the capability to define an assembly sequence or multiple assembly sequences in ShipConstructor. And that's a rich data set that you can then leverage in shipbuilding as PLM as well for other downstream use cases. So now we've completed, and this is simplified, there's more information, of course, but the diagrams get too messy. We've now brought in that rich data set from ShipConstructor and we've connected it up to the digital thread. So now we can leverage things such as assembly sequences within our 3D visualization. And the digital thread is down to the part level. So, for example, that plate element there, if you change that hole, there we will know all the other affected items as well, the sub-assembly, the plate nest, where that plate part's used. They will all be configuration controlled in Shipbuilding PLM without requiring any user input. The change is something that we're aware of, and we can automatically capture that change as it happens. So as Casey mentioned, there is a transition happening in the industry to move away from production drawings to model-based approaches. Right now, we believe it's the transition, so we're offering both worlds and making sure the configuration control together. So that production drawing is always lined up with that 3D lightweight assembly that you can investigate and take off dimensioning and perhaps start a problem report from it. And there's a typing error that came in there. Self-service access to production design is what we're meant to say there. So self-service production design is a key aspect there in terms of our approach.
Yeah.
One of the things we can leverage from the ARIS platform is federated properties and capabilities to bring in data from other systems without having to move the data. So here we see some examples of simulating integration of a manufacturing execution system, where we can see within the 3D visualization if a spool's already started some production process, and also build number information, some planning information there. So again, the important thing is we've provided that rich data set, the configuration control data set, for you to be able to do this and make sure it's been reviewed and approved before production are starting to actually look at this. And of course, that data set then can also be integrated with third-party tools as well. So if I was going to talk about change, I'd probably need another 20 minutes or so, because I think I'm probably running out of time already. But change is a significant risk. I think, as we saw from that process earlier on, if you think about, I have a late change coming in there in functional design, for example, and this will happen in a ship where you have, a long time for its construction. The actual engineering will take, and you've got sister ships as well. So you will inevitably be facing change as all of this is still going on. So one of the key things is being able to track change and be aware of all the change that's happening in engineering, how it impacts related products. And you can only do that if you effectively have a connected digital thread, right? But as a foundation capability, what we need to have is, the capability to understand that data set, allow people to do scoping of change. And we've taken the basic ECR objects in ARIS and adapted them to understand our data, and also to be able to understand the data sets where, for example, you have here functional change happening at the same time as product model change. So that's a use case that does happen in shipbuilding. So leveraging visual collaboration, and again, because it's part-centric, we're swapping those valves there. We can see impact to other items as well. We can probably impact those spool, the pipe there, and probably the spools. And here we're now tracking what has actually happened in terms of change via what we call our parent ECO object, our SSI ECO object, and it's making sure that ECR, you can see those changes, those scope changes, and you can effectively see if what you've executed in terms of change aligns with what you've scoped in terms of change. We provide, you've got a huge ship, sometimes you want to see just what's changed in a specific area. So for example, there we're seeing the actual execution of change, a quick, visualization of what's actually been executed there in terms of the 3D product model change. So some key takeaways from our platform. It's shipbuilding-specific, it's out of the box, part-centric data model and digital thread, centralized product data repository. And I know perhaps this sounds a bit, over commercial, mentioning this out of the box, but we have to emphasize that it is a differentiator. Being able to install shipbuilding PLM with everything you saw today there wasn't one should we say, one customization that was done to provide any of those forms, any of those data models, all of those capabilities are there as the box. Of course, you need to adapt them to each client from workflows, additional properties, but there's a lot of inbuilt capability, right? And that allows you, I'm going to get it right this time, Pat. I tried to get it around first base, second base, third base, and I got it wrong the other day because I'm not familiar with baseball as much. But we say, I would say, it allows you to start on third base. There we go, got it right. That's closer to the home run. There we go. Okay. So, of course, when we can't do this all by ourselves, we need strong partners. And Aris has been an excellent partner for us. They've been both an excellent partner in terms of on the technology side, but also on the relationship side. We've known Aris for a long time. The first ACE I went to was in 2016. So, a lot of familiar people in Aris. And they have a very open, transparent relationship. They're very much focused on solving problems. And they understand that we're providing a vertical solution on top of their platform and want to support us. So, we're excited to see that they're evolving technology areas that align with what we know our clients need and Ingalls certainly needs, and the other people you're working with on that project. Advanced 3D visualization capabilities, integration with third-party MBST. We were very happy when we saw XPLM being acquired by Aris because, it's great to have a one company to go to. I'm not saying they're going to solve the problems, but they have a good foundation technology layer there for integration use cases. And, as we've seen in various presentations, continued emphasis on the low-code platform. So, as if you recall from the slides that I showed previously, if we've got that configuration gap, well, it's become easier now to even address that configuration gap from the base platform. So the low-code platform for us is also important because we're going to have to adapt what we offer out of the box for each specific client. So, wrapping up here, I provided a list initially of what we saw as found, some key there are other things as well, but I think, these are some of the key things we need to provide. And a lot of them we're providing already to solve some of those complex problems that Casey mentioned. We're on a journey together with Ingalls and with other clients as well. And, we're very happy to have that partnership and to have that conversation with them so that as we evolve our digital platform, we can always be, bouncing off ideas, hearing feedback, and also there being on the other side, an interest in listening to what we're proposing as well. So I think partnerships work effectively when you have that type of approach. Okay.